Kaia didn't expect to be remembered. Not by them, not by the system. Not after the way they made her disappear, politely, quietly, like deleting a file too small to matter. Since her silent demotion in 2037, Kaia lived on the edges of the Ellison map. Remote work only, no meetings, no votes, no family dinners. A ghost in the server. Until one night, her wrist pad blinked. A ping. Sharp. Singular. A sound she hadn't heard in 4 years. She stared at the screen. Identity verification requested digital testament. Ellison Systems clearance code. Key 719 date. August 17, 2041 location. Core Hall, Seattle. Kaia froze. Key, her internal ID from before they scrubbed her access. But the number 719, it wasn't random. That was her birthday, and also the time, 7:19 p.m. when her grandfather sent her his last message before he died. No preamble, no emojis, just him. Raw. Don't let them snuff out your light. Some of us code in silence. She'd stared at that message for days, wondering if he meant it metaphorically or literally. No one else in the family talked about his death. No memorial, no shared post. Just silence. As if even grieving him was unauthorized. But now, this ping. This strange, encrypted invitation that somehow slipped through the Ellison firewall. Kaia closed her laptop, slid on her coat, and stepped into the Seattle night, wet, humming, post-crisis and post-truth. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe the system glitched. Or maybe, somewhere deep in the code, he remembered. Ellison Core Hall didn't feel like home. It felt like a cathedral built by people who'd already erased you from the family photo. The walls pulsed with soft white code, streams of light and lineage. Names floated in the air. None of them were hers. Kaia stepped through the biometric field. It hesitated like even the system wasn't sure she belonged. Then it let her pass. Inside, everything was chrome and glass. Ariel stood near the central dais, radiant as always, a portrait of what the Ellison bloodline should have been, at least according to them. When she spotted Kaia, the corners of her mouth curled, not in warmth, but in performance. Wow, you actually showed up. A few heads turned, some smirked. Kaia just nodded and stood by the wall. No chair had her name, she didn't expect one. Ariel's voice sliced through the air like a high-function command. You do know this is just a formality, right? The real decisions were made years ago. Grandpa and I went over every scenario. The board approved it. You don't need to pretend you're part of this. Kaia didn't respond. She couldn't. Her throat was tight, not from sadness, but from something older. Memory of birthday parties where her name was misspelled on the cake. Of family dinners where the conversation skipped over her as if she were a buffering screen. Of walking into a room and feeling like background noise in her own bloodline. Above them, a holographic interface began to glow. Final testament loading. Voice match confirmed, Theodore Ellison. The room shifted. Ariel's expression changed barely, but Kaia saw it. Just the flicker of uncertainty behind the confidence. And in that flicker, Kaia didn't feel small. She felt present, maybe for the first time in years, because someone was about to speak her name in a system built to forget her. The light dimmed. Every conversation faded into static as the holographic panel at the front of the room flickered, then stabilized. A neutral, genderless AI voice broke the silence. Final asset distribution initializing. Stand by for core-level access reveal. Kaia kept her arms folded, pulse steady. But her mind was already bracing for the usual. A footnote. A 0.02% courtesy nod. Maybe a recycled apartment pod somewhere in Tacoma. The voice continued. Primary beneficiary 1, Ariel Ellison, 3% stake in Ellison Ops and external partnerships. Applause broke out. Smiles returned. Ariel turned to the room, soaking in the moment like it was her second skin. Thank you, as expected. The voice wasn't done. Primary beneficiary too, Kaia Ellison, 91% stake in Ellison Core Systems. Full access to root directory, Ellison AI Cloud, Neural Vaults, Biometric Ledger, and digital estate, including unreleased protocols and project ownership. Silence, then silence that deepened. The kind of silence you could fall into. Someone near the back dropped a stylus. Ariel's smile cracked like old glass. That's wrong. She doesn't even have level 3 clearance. She hasn't been on site in 6 years. This has to be a technical fault. The AI replied, voice unbothered. Hash confirmed. Signature sealed. Update irreversible. A lawyer in the corner, the same man who once told Kaia she didn't fit the optics of Ellison leadership, looked pale. She didn't speak, didn't gloat, she didn't need to. The system had spoken for her, and it hadn't just chosen her name. It had chosen her memory, her fingerprints, her presence in rooms no one bothered to monitor. Ariel stepped forward, voice rising. You really think this means anything? A technical inheritance doesn't make you one of us. Kaia looked at her, calm, clear. No, it doesn't make me one of you. It makes me everything this company pretended it still was. And in that moment, she didn't just inherit a network, she became it. The screen shifted. Every line of data faded, replaced by a still image, grainy, grayscale, captured from a corner angle. No filters, no edits. Just an old man in a wool sweater, sitting on a porch bench, a mug in his hands. The AI voice went quiet, and then voice authentication, Theodore Ellison. Timestamp, December 12th, 2039, unlisted recording. The room stilled, even Ariel froze, the voice began softer than anyone expected. If you're hearing this, I'm likely gone, but that's not why I'm speaking. I want to talk about a moment one no one else saw. The image blurred slightly as Theodore coughed. His hands trembled around the mug. It was a Tuesday, cold, post-surgery. I couldn't keep food down. My sons were in Singapore. My daughters were negotiating over dinner reservations. And Kaia just showed up. The image cleared, his voice broke just slightly. No cameras, no statement, just a thermos of hot cocoa, sat down beside me and said nothing. She didn't ask for a title. She didn't need a screen. She was there. And in this family, presence is rarer than brilliance. A flicker on screen, a beat of digital static. Then, to the board, I made you all memorize numbers, pitch decks, bloodline trees, but I only gave one person the master key. Because she looked me in the eye when I was no longer powerful. Because when I couldn't remember a password, she remembered me. Ariel shook her head. This isn't legally binding. The system cut her off. This recording is tagged with founder-level hash ID, irrefutable, immutable. Kaia still hadn't moved. Her eyes locked on the screen, not in triumph, not even in pride, but in grief. Because that was the last time she ever saw him. Just an old man and a girl with cocoa. No contracts, no shareholders, just one quiet moment that turned into the code that changed everything. Ariel stood frozen, one hand still hovering in midair as if she could swipe the screen away. This was tampered with, she said. It's too emotional. Grandpa never recorded things like this without legal counsel. The lawyer, gray suit, neural implant glowing behind his ear, cleared his throat. Ma'am, the founder's voice print is authenticated across 5 verification layers. This file was sealed inside the biometric ledger in 2039, 2 years before his death. It hasn't been touched, not by human hands, not by code, not even by AI. Ariel stepped back, face flushed, words stumbling over each other. But she didn't do anything. She wasn't in strategy meetings. She didn't design the revenue pivot. She didn't even show up to the memorial. Kaia finally spoke. Soft, clear, unshakable. There wasn't one. You all streamed a highlight reel, then posted about his legacy over champagne. I didn't show up because I was still with him while he was alive. That hit. The room didn't gasp. It didn't have to. Because some truths don't crash like thunder, they settle like gravity. Ariel stepped forward, louder now. I'm going to challenge this. I'll escalate to corporate arbitration. There's no way she... Kaia looked at her eyes, steady. You can file whatever you want, but the blockchain doesn't care how loudly you panic. She glanced toward the screen where her name, finally, quietly, glowed beneath the Ellison Core logo. It doesn't reward titles. It remembers presence, and it doesn't forget attitude. Ariel opened her mouth, closed it. Even her mother couldn't meet Kaia's eyes, because in this family built on dominance, vanity, and spotlight, the person no one thought to include had already written herself into the foundation, without applause, without permission, without needing to be seen. Kaia didn't go home right away. She stood on the terrace outside Ellison Core Hall long after the last guest had fled. Rain smeared the skyline, and the fog clung low over the electric bay. Somewhere far below, a drone buzzed quietly, making its deliveries unaffected by legacy or grief. And in the silence, her memory opened like a file. It was December, 2035. Her grandfather had just come back from his second surgery. The house was dim, empty, not because of privacy, but because no one else had shown up. Everyone else had sent flowers, assistance, or links to virtual messages. Kaia had brought cocoa, real cocoa. The kind he liked, dark, bitter, with oat milk and a pinch of cinnamon. He was sitting on the porch, blanketed in silence, coughs, and slow decline. She handed him the thermos, didn't say a word. He looked at her hands, then his eyes, then the sky, and after a long, rasping breath, he whispered, "Khan doesn't try to fix me. Everyone else wants to update me, upgrade me, erase what doesn't fit their pitch decks. But you just sit." Kaia said nothing. And that's what presence is, Kaia. Not performance, not noise, just being here even when no one's recording. Back in the present, she finally understood. It wasn't just cocoa. It wasn't even kindness. It was the one moment in his final years that wasn't staged. And like everything he truly valued, he encoded it. That afternoon, without her knowing, he logged into his private biometric vault. He labeled the event manually. The Cocoa Protocol. Encrypted it, signed it with his own blood sample, and built the master key on top of that moment. Because in a world of curated legacies, the truest thing left was the silence she shared with him. The elevator to the Ellison Core control room required no keycard. It simply scanned her palm and let her in. No questions, no applause, just access. The glass doors parted without a sound. Rows of holo screens stretched out in gentle arcs, each one running a live system under her name now. Ellison Cloud, Ellison Vaults, Ellison Behavioral AI, even the family trust. All hers, not inherited, entrusted. Kaia didn't change the interface, didn't touch the brand, didn't lock anyone out. She simply walked to the master terminal, typed in her custom string, Cocoa, Protocol. Key 719, the system pulsed. Recognized her. A prompt appeared. "Would you like to update the mission statement?" She paused, then typed without hesitation, built with silence, guarded by presence. No fanfare, just a soft, confirming chime. Behind her, the city hummed on. The family would scramble, posture, scheme. They'd try to spin this, try to negotiate with something they could never control again. But she didn't need revenge. She had something rarer, something that couldn't be broadcast, couldn't be sold. Legacy rooted in truth. And in the end, that's what the system remembered. Not the loudest voice, not the most polished face, but the one who stayed when there was nothing left to gain.